Steve here again, and I am giving you a short little announcement that, as you well know, the History of the Papacy and Beyond the Big Screen are members of the Parthenon Podcast Network, and today I'm welcoming the latest member of the Parthenon Podcast Network, Josh Cohen, who is the host of the Eyewitness History Podcast. In this podcast, now you'll probably be familiar with Josh, being that he is a multiple-time guest on Beyond the Big Screen. Josh is the host of the Eyewitness History Podcast. He is also the managing editor of the history website History on the Net. And Josh's whole thing is he loves hearing great stories. He started a podcast earlier called Unfiltered with Josh Cohen, which has been going on for 5 years. And he got the idea for starting this Eyewitness History Podcast. What you'll hear from Josh in Eyewitness History is real stories from history, from the people who experienced this history. And there'll be interviews with people who experienced historical events. There'll be testimonials from people who actually experienced certain events in history. And today you're going to get a short little snippet of what Josh is doing, particularly from two people. One is Bill Taylor, who is an author and Vietnam War veteran. He shares his experience about his new book on full automatic, surviving 13 months in Vietnam. He shared what he felt when he first landed in Vietnam, and he shares why the Marines almost didn't allow him to leave Vietnam. So that's really interesting. And then we'll get another taste from Hope Harrison, who is a professor of history, and Hope was on a flight to Berlin when she got word that the wall fell. And she'll explain a little bit more about some of the details she experienced with the fall of the wall. You can also participate if you experienced or were a part of a historical event. You can contact Josh. All you have to do is go to his website, eyewitnesshistorypodcast.com, and click on the Speak Pipe button, and that'll tell you everything you need to know, the details. But you can leave a message in there, and then Josh will get in contact with you, and it's just a great way to share your own personal story. Now, also, to launch the show, we as a network are doing a little bit of a giveaway where the first 5 people to leave a review on Apple Podcasts page for the podcast will get a $50 Amazon gift card. For instructions on how to enter and all that good stuff, go over to eyewitnesshistorypodcast.com. You have until midnight on Friday, April 15th to enter. You've got a lot of things to do if you're in the U.S. on April 15th, but make sure you get it done before that, just like you do with your taxes. It is a pleasure to announce Josh's podcast. I am already hooked and a fan, and I know you'll enjoy too, so enjoy this little taste of Eyewitness History, and I'll talk to you next time.
What was it like to hear about the JFK assassination? Or America's triumph over Hitler? Or seeing Queen at Live Aid? Our past is a collection of stories that bring us to now. Welcome to the Eyewitness History Podcast, where we view history through the eyes of the people that watch the events that shaped our world. Here's your host, Josh Cohen, and these are their stories.
As you might imagine, Bill, with a podcast like Eyewitness History, one of my goals, as it were, is to basically put the listeners there. And I'd like to know, what was your mindset like when you were first boots down in Vietnam? What were you feeling? Can you recall?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. First of all, my first boots down was in Okinawa. I met my battalion, 1st Battalion, 3rd Marines there. They had brought this battalion of Marines from Quezon to Okinawa to be trained as a Special Landing Force helicopter assault group. Well, not only were we training for helicopter assault, we also Mike boats and Amtraks, getting on and off ships. So they trained us for at least 6 to 8 weeks of hard, intense training. And that's where I first had my experience of Vietnam. But I remember being on the USS Okinawa going towards the shore, and I remember walking through the center of the Okinawa, waiting in line to get on the helicopters. And, the adrenaline's flowing, you're going in, you've been trained, you know what you're going to do. You had the old salts who knew what they were doing, and you had this whole new group of new people joining it to bring this battalion of Marines. That's 1,350 Marines.
Wow.
One big, large group and 4 companies of basic infantry and 1 company of weapons. And so they divided the weapons up into the different companies, and then they divided it up into the different platoons. And we're on the helicopters. I mean, you have no idea what it feels like, the adrenaline. It's almost like a carnival ride. For the first time, you're getting up and you're starting to, go in the helicopter, and it's shaking like it's going to tear apart. And then all of a sudden it smooths out. Cold air rushes in. You got fumes going into your face. And then as you're lifting off the helicopter as your group lifting up, all of a sudden you look off and you see the USS Sanctuary or the USS Repose sitting off into the distance. So you feel like, oh, is this a good thing or a bad thing? I mean, good because it's there, bad because obviously there's going to be a problem. Otherwise, it wouldn't be following us around.
Right. And
then, of course, coming in the hot choppers go really high into the air. And as we were starting to land, I remember in Okinawa, we trained, it was about 80 degrees, 85 degrees, the hottest. When we hit that ground early that morning, it was so hot, and it was early in the morning. And, we jumped off the helicopters and we went up and set up a perimeter. And of course, just like you see in We Were Soldiers, they would just take off and in kind of a tandem, one after the other. And now you're standing there by yourself. The word came down. They didn't take us far enough into where they were supposed to. So we had to walk an extra 5 miles just to get to the spot we were supposed to be at. Wow. And it was so hot. Guys were drinking water. I mean, the thirst. And you're carrying 50, 60 pounds of gear. I mean, you got this helmet on, you got your flak jacket. And I remember, first hands on the ground, it was really, you felt strong and powerful and everything else. But once you got to a point, well, first of all, that first day, this guy started passing out. Heat exhaustion. We just couldn't move. It got to be so bad that they brought some of the helicopters back just to take guys up in the air and bring them back down to cool them off. That's how bad it was.
Wow. And
we were in this valley, and there's supposed to be at least another full regiment. That means 3,500 North Vietnamese coming into this area, and they're supposed to get their food. This area was North Vietnamese and Viet Cong friendly. They didn't like Americans. I mean, they weren't for us. So whenever you ran across anybody, they were just get the heck out of our way. And, our battalion was sweeping up the valley, all the companies sweeping up the valley and a straight across. And there was 3 other battalions that were already in the hills sweeping around. So what we're trying to do is get this 3,500 NVA pretty much trying to trap them up there.
Right.
And so I remember the first time we're going in the valley, and then they started shooting. We got into this area where it wasn't jungle, but it was very heavy brush. And all of a sudden the AK-47 started coming at us. And I got to tell you, we practiced for this. We practiced, but there's nothing like someone trying to kill you. It's a whole different feeling altogether. I mean, the adrenaline's flowing and you're getting down and you're what you're trained to do, but you're terrified at the very same second. So, you're hiding behind a log and I'm just spraying fire out there I can't see what it is, but if we're going to try to scare the hell out of them, shoot as many rounds as you can. So all that was, we didn't know it at the time, but that was just a delaying tactic that they used. They would slow us up so they could set up to see where we were going and pass the word so they could set up ambushes and things like that. So, of course, you go a little further and, all of a sudden you're in the open and there's a little hill in front of us. We're starting to climb this first hill and I heard the bloop, 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 bloop sound. It's just exactly bloop, bloop. You're hearing it. And being a new guy, I don't know. What the heck is that sound? They're blooping. And all of the old salts are saying, hit the dirt, hit the deck. And it's they're down. And we're all standing there going, what for? And all of a sudden you hear them go over your head. And it's oh, wow. I mean, that's the first learning, hearing the bloop. And so from then on, if you heard that sound, you got right down just like the old salts did. So, it's a learning process that happened to me in Vietnam. Just every little thing we did was just learning. And this whole battalion was learning. Also, all of the sergeants. And we had great leadership, great sergeants, great squad leaders, great platoon sergeant. He was phenomenal. And we had this gung-ho lieutenant who was, absurd. At least we thought he was absurd because, he just, all he wanted to do was, charge. And we know, from just watching TV, that doesn't always work. You got to think first. So it was difficult. It was difficult for us all. And then, of course, as the day lingered on, more guys heat stroke. I think we lost a good 80 guys from heat stroke. We lost them for a day, and they had to bring them back out later. Their eyes rolling in the back of their heads and stuff like that. But no more water. After the first day, people were drinking all their water, and I was just trying to baby my water. And I was big legs, big, strong guy. So I was able to kind of hump where, I was on the football team, I was on the basketball team, I was in all these sports. And I think that helped me, push through all that stuff where, if you didn't have that, you just kind of drank your water and didn't care. Well, that also taught us how to really start sharing, not drinking as much water and guzzling water or trying to lose water like you're going to pour it on yourself. It becomes a very valuable commodity.
Yeah.
So that's the first experience of like my first day.
So on November 9th, 1989, when the wall fell by surprise, I happened to be on a plane headed from the U.S. to West Berlin, knowing nothing of what was happening on the ground. Talk about an amazing stroke of luck. So I was with a group of graduate students from Harvard and Stanford, brought to West Berlin. Every year they brought a group of students. And we left Kennedy Airport in New York City the evening of November 9th and touched down the next morning in Frankfurt. You couldn't fly directly into West Berlin. You had to fly to West Germany and then take either Pan Am, Air France, or British Airways from West Germany to West Berlin. So when we got on the commuter flight from Frankfurt to West Berlin, I saw everyone reading newspapers with these huge banner headlines saying Die Mauer ist offen, which means the wall is open. And I'm thinking, what? Like, what is going on? I'm thinking, is my German not as good as I think it is? Or maybe is November 10th the equivalent of April Fool's Day in Germany? What the heck? So I'm sitting there really wondering when the pilot gets on the intercom and he says, ladies and gentlemen, in case you haven't heard, the Berlin Wall fell last night and we are flying into history. Wow. I could not believe it. I was a graduate student writing my dissertation on the Berlin Wall, and now suddenly it seemed to be coming down. It was just amazing. So we arrived in West Berlin. I was there for 10 days. I shared the incredible moments of jubilation with so many Berliners watching bulldozers come and remove pieces of the wall to create new entry and exit points between East Berlin and West Berlin. I stood in this line of this, people formed two lines on either side of the new crossing point to greet the East Berliners who were coming through, either on foot or in their cars. I watched these people from the West hugging these people from the East. I watched them give them flowers, give them West German money, the Deutschmark, watch them give them champagne. People were crying, people were hugging. It was just incredible. And in fact, The word most associated with those hours after the Berlin Wall opened was Wahnsinn, which means crazy. All these people were standing there saying, it's Wahnsinn. This is Wahnsinn. This is crazy. This thing that people thought could never happen had happened and happened peacefully that weekend in West Berlin. So the wall fell what was Thursday night to Friday night, November 9th to 10th. So now it's Friday the 10th, and then you've got the weekend. 2 million East Germans visited the city of West Berlin that weekend. Now, there were only 2.5 million people living in West Berlin, so the population almost doubled over the weekend with all these visitors. The main street in West Berlin, sort of the equivalent of Fifth Avenue in New York, is called the Kurfürstendamm or the Kudamm. Well, they had to close the Kudamm to traffic because there were just mobs and mobs of East Germans strolling the main street, looking at the storefronts, looking at all the goods that they didn't have in East Berlin, going to movie theaters, going to the most famous department store, which is 6 stories. It's called KaDeWe, sort of like Harrods in London, this most amazing store. The top floor was the food floor, and they have like hundreds of different kinds of sausages. And of course, Germans love sausages, what we would call hot dogs. That floor with the food was packed with East Germans. Others were going to visit family or friends that they hadn't seen, sometimes in decades. So it was such an amazing, joyous experience that I will never forget.
Thanks for listening to this episode. For more information on Eyewitness History, along with show notes and links to resources, go to parthenonpodcast.com, where you can also listen to some other great podcasts by the Parthenon Network, such as Scott Rank's History Unplugged, Steve Guerra's Beyond the Big Screen, and James Early's Key Battles of American History, along with many others. Thank you.